Hey everyone. The biggest farms in Asia may be scam farms. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. I am not in studio today because, of course, I'm getting ready to get out to San Francisco for the RSA conference. So I'm coming at you from a place called Highland Beach, Florida. Not many people know it. It's a sleepy little 3-mile stretch of A1A. But we've got a great show for you this fine Monday. A lot of going on, pre-RSA stuff. It's our last pre-RSA gang. Let me introduce you to our gang members for today. I want to start off with someone making her first appearance here on the gang with us. We're really excited to have her, though. If you follow the cybersecurity beat, you've probably read some of the things she's written over the years. Terry Robinson. Terry, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. I am so pleased to be here. I can't wait to get started.
I think it's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Joining Terry today, also from a cybersecurity bend, our resident Canadian, or is that an oxymoron, a resident Canadian? But he's up in Canada anyways, our cyber expert, Chris Blask. Hey, Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good. Good to be here. Glad to be here. Yeah, I'm an American in Canada, so I have a Canadian family, and everyone gets that confused, and so do I. So I plan on adding to that more today. So
very cool. Also joining us today from New Mexico, looking great in that 4K. He's the CEO of Deploy Hub, open source advocate extraordinaire, our own Tracy Reagan. Hey, Tracy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm really excited to have Terry on, another cyber expert. This is going to be a great conversation.
Absolutely. And then rounding out the cast, it's the dean of our panel. He's Chief Content Officer from Harrison, New York. That's lefty, throws righty, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
And I, too, am excited to see Terry on the show because we have another delegate from the great state of New York. So finally.
Right here in Harlem.
The great state of New York.
Yeah.
Really, very cool. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's kick it off, Mike. I said a little something on the opening. It seems Asia has started a new kind of scam farm.
I think this has been something of a dirty little secret, but most of these scams online are actually being perpetrated by folks that have been roped into these, I guess, scam rings is the only way to call it, or run by these syndicates. Then they're all operating out of countries in Africa and other places like Asia, where they're basically turned into slaves that are driving these scams and sending people email and creating all kinds of false, now deep fakes and all kinds of stuff. And Chris, I know you've been following this for a while, and it seems to have become overwhelming, but is there anything to be done about any of this stuff? I mean, the UN kind of shined the spotlight on it, but it seems like to me that this is, not just criminally wrong, but just gotten to a level of moral turpitude.
Right. I'm trying to think of something here. Let's take a direction on this, right? So one is criminals do criminal things, right? Organized crime does, oddly enough, organized crime. And this, in the digital age has transitioned to the point where it makes economic logical sense for criminal organizations to do these things. And the other half of it, again, is how old this is, right? I happen to, I don't think maybe it was 10 years ago or so, witness perhaps the last of the actual postal versions of this. Some good old boy friend of mine here in Canada contacted me and said, hey, I won the Irish lottery, right? And I had to drive over to his house, look at this thing, get him to, change his banking information that he'd already shared. So, this is it. In this particular case, and this, the story we're talking about here, this is one of these global existential criminal situations. We're talking actual human slavery and exploitation. So we can take it from any angle we like. As a security person, I would like to beat this horse again. That this is an example of how many fundamentals we're missing. Right? You have no idea. There's no way we can tell, an elderly, non-technically savvy, family member, how they can distinguish something like this that is a scam from something that isn't a scam. So there's problems up and down the stack with this one.
Yeah. I mean, to me, there's two main issues here. One is the scams that these people perpetrate. As you said, Chris, they prey on the weak. They prey on the elderly. They prey on the non-sophisticated or unsophisticated when it comes to this kind of stuff. And that's bad. And guys, it's not just emails anymore. It's smishing, right? SMS messaging. It's phone calls, right? We've all gotten those phone calls where, someone gets on the phone and says hello, and you hear like the whole call center going on in the background, and you can imagine somewhere in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or somewhere is this huge boiler room operation, right? With hundreds or dozens at the very least of these people just smiling and dialing, trying to talk you out of your money. But what makes it really insidious is that the people who are doing the work here, sending the emails, making the calls, sending the text messages, are not the heads of the criminal operations themselves, but this is akin to sex trafficking. It's akin to child trafficking. They get these people in these places, and you're right, Mike. It's not just Asia. This happens in Africa, right? It probably happens in the U.S. with illegal immigrants who get taken advantage of and stuff. But they get these people in with the promise of, hey, you're going to get a job and you can make hundreds and thousands of dollars a week. And then once they get them in there, there's no getting out. You're sucked into this life, and so it's a form of slavery. It's abuse. So it's doubly bad. And it's high time, these countries where this is taking place have a responsibility to crack down on it.
Which is in the US, by the way. The US.
No, it's in the US. I don't doubt it.
And I want to point something out that, when I had I have a cousin, she called me one day and she was in an absolute panic. She had lost $40,000 in one of these scams. She did not want to tell anybody. She reached out to me because she felt like she could talk to me and I could tell her what to do to protect herself in the future, which is part of the problem. The shame that goes along with these scams is part of the way that they work. Because if I kept encouraging her to go to the police, they don't know what to do. Call your local representative. They didn't know what to do for her. So I finally said, go call the newspaper. So she finally got brave enough to tell her story to a newspaper, even though she was full of shame and did not want to do it. They put a note in the local newspaper where she was, and they got hundreds of people calling and saying they had also been scammed. So there is a part of this, the success of these organizations, it is created by us being quiet about it and not really understanding the breadth of the problem. So I feel like, I'm the person who always talks about fixing problems, vulnerabilities when they get to production. Well, these vulnerabilities are in production. How do we hear about them? How do we let the communities that are being hit know that this is happening? And how do we track this kind of illegal activity? Because in her journey, there was nobody to talk to, no one, and that's a problem in
I
itself.
was going to say I have a similar thing with a family member, and the shame factor is huge. Didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to, sort of spread the word. Told me because she knew the kind of work that I did, and that was it. And we sort of locally spread the word to people quietly in her community. On the other hand, my mother, who passed away at 100, was adamant about not falling for a scam. she would call somebody out if she got a phone call, an email, a text, or whatever. She was on the other side. But yeah, and so I actually had this discussion when I was closing out my mom's estate. I was in her bank, and they had signs up all over in customer service, particularly aimed at elderly people, talking about the kinds of scams that they could face, and what to do and the steps that they should take. I should have probably screenshotted or taken a snap of what their advice was, but I did talk to the banker there, and they said, yes, we have people coming in all the time, and sometimes they sort of sheepishly, confess that something has happened. It's also, when it comes to like pulling money out of accounts, perhaps the financial institutions can be a little more aggressive. I mean, if you see an 80-year-old person coming in and wanting to pull out, I don't know, 40 or $50,000 out of an account because they're going to then go to a kiosk at Circle K or something like that and convert it to Bitcoin or whatnot and send it, then is that, something that maybe they should ask a couple of questions? You can't invade somebody's privacy, but can you say, is everything okay? Are you sure you want to do this? I don't know what the answer is there, but
Yeah, and in my cousin's case, Terry, she actually went to the bank and pulled the money out and did the transfer, and they begged her not to do it, and she was convinced that she owed
well,
this money
and
to
I'm
them.
gonna say what the scammer that got my friend actually told her that people at the bank were in on it. So she needed to, you know, to be quiet, to kind of
Mhm. Can I make a suggestion here? I would suggest the following. We know that these operations are being hosted in certain countries. We also know that there's a high probability that money is being slid out the back door from these operations to the people who run those countries. We are currently discussing the use of tariffs to be applied to countries that are shipping fentanyl around the world. Ipso facto, this crime is probably just up there with the same level of harm. We just don't quantify it as much. But since we all know at least 3 people who have probably been scammed, maybe it's time to get a little more aggressive with the countries that are hosting these operations.
Again, yeah, I'll just echo what's been said. I don't think necessarily even Canada, it might be entirely clean, and I have my thoughts about the US on this. But, let me suggest something else. And this is going to sound as cliche and as trendy as it sounds in my head, but I think it's true. Chat GPT, right? I think even on the recent episodes of this, I might have mentioned this. I've had some homeless friends, some people in really dire straits, and found myself saying, honestly, install ChatGPT. Because sometimes when you're all alone, just asking a question of anybody, like you say, Tracy, people I've been contacted similarly by friends and family. It's like, because it's embarrassing. And with all the flaws and all the downsides of these, what we call AI these days, that might be the recommendation. That might be the sign in the bank. We say to our friends, family, critically, the older ones are less technically sophisticated. If this looks weird, you don't want to talk to anybody else, there's this little app. And it doesn't have to be literally ChatGPT, but one of these AI apps, just say, does this sound right? Because even if the answers, as you find when you use these tools, even if the answers aren't totally correct, it's a good place to start. And if you take this, and go to Google and put in 3 words, Irish lottery, you're not going to get a lot of help. So maybe this is one of these cases we can point at that this new trendy class of tools has a real benefit. So I can't think of anything else that's going to help.
Couple of things here. First of all, Chris, I appreciate that sweet little old lady voice you used there. To ask ChatGPT if this is right. I should save that. But Mike Vizard, are you sitting here telling me that tariffs are the answer to cure this?
I'm saying it's one tool in the kit, but we got to get aggressive with these places that are hosting these.
I don't know if tariffs, there's too much
Yeah,
potential abuse.
and I'm not convinced that it's not, they're not nation states. These are criminals. These are mobs. These are criminals that are doing it. And if they're in some small country in Africa, who cares about a tariff?
Right.
And they're in Alabama and Illinois too.
Yeah, I don't think it happens in places. It does. that you would be
Well, and
surprised.
the other aspect of that is we're already using tariffs pretty aggressively. I'm not sure how much more we can go without damage to us.
No, yeah, you know, and then it
But I think
becomes a
it's
political tool.
an interesting concept.
But it's never discussed. It's never discussed, and this problem destroys as many lives as fentanyl
Indeed.
does.
Mhm.
And it's not
Very-
discussed, and the people who are targeted are shamed. They don't want to talk about it. It's hidden, and we do not have a national discourse around this particular problem. And I'm glad, Terry, that your bank has notices up for
Yeah.
people to
I
understand
just think,
it.
people understand the downside of fentanyl, right? I mean, and they'll pontificate on it. I mean, just your average person on the street. I don't think they understand these kinds of threats. And also, I think there's maybe some more judgment there with people. Oh, you were just dumb. You were stupid. You got scammed, which doesn't help the situation.
I mean, I will tell you, I bank with Chase. And anytime I go to Zelle or wire money, I get so many pop-ups and they want you to affirmatively click, right? That you've read this stuff about, once it's gone, it's gone. Make sure this is real. Make sure this isn't a scam. Here's some resources to check and blah, blah, blah. Now, I don't know how many people actually just click the button and move on and how many actually read or follow through. But, and again, depending on your view of government, what the role of government and stuff is this an individual responsibility thing, even though they are preying on the weak and the lonely and the elderly? But is it an individual responsibility thing, or do we have a collective responsibility, both from the corporate financial institution level as well as the government level, to protect people from this?
Yeah. I guess.
Empirically, we do. You look at our history, right? This is the ancient scam, right? At the root of this is nothing new. This is the shiny, glass ring that looks like a diamond that some desperate stranger is trying to convince you, that you're going to get a good deal out of. This is the desire, as Moist von Lipwig, and would say in all the Discworld books, right? This is that hope we all have. So, Alan, yeah, I mean, we have been instituting laws and protections and mechanisms against this forever. So it's part of, yes, individual responsibility at the end of the day, but also laws and mechanisms.
I have another thing I'd like to see because, I'm clearly the radical in this conversation, but I would like to see Amazon and eBay and all these people who make a living off of transactions online to contribute to some sort of fund to combat this stuff. And that we set up, because ultimately we need to protect.
Could we just start with them paying taxes on the income they make?
No, I'm thinking that they have a specific interest in this particular issue because it destroys the faith anybody has in online transactions in the first place.
But this isn't just e-commerce, right? A lot of this is romance stuff, right? They preying on a lonely man or woman. Oh, I'd like to get to know you. As I've gotten older, I get a lot of these notes online. Oh, I'd like to, so it's all part of that. But anyway, I think we've talked this one out. Let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang, and let's come back and talk about AI app security agents. I'm sure this is going to be one of 50 that I hear in the next week at RSA. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Hey folks, we're back, and as Alan alluded, there are all these new AI agents that are promising to review your code, make some suggestions about how to fix something if there's a security issue, and even look at the architecture itself to see if it's weak in the first place. To Alan's point, there'll probably be tons of these tools coming along. The first two that at least we're aware of is Ender Labs and Cycode, but I can't imagine anybody who's in the DevSecOps space not having some sort of similar capability. But Tracy, A, is this going to work? And B, is it going to make a difference?
Well, I think one of the important pieces of information that comes from this indoor labs in particular is the acknowledgement that the code that we're generating through AI is not necessarily safe. And we've had this discussion in the past about the fact that when you start generating this many lines of code, you have more opportunities to have vulnerabilities in them, and it's harder to keep up with it. So, they're doing something pretty unique, and I'm happy to see that we're moving beyond just code scanning for known vulnerabilities. And in this case, they were literally mapping risk factors to coding. It looks like they've taken some time. It says the Indoor in particular has looked at 4.5 million open source projects. And yes, there's that many out there, and there's more than that. To understand what the structure of code looks like, where those and how they map to those risk factors. So I think we're getting to a level of maturity that will actually make a difference in application security. That being said, there's always, it's great to have a good goalie. It's great to have somebody standing in front of your house making sure the bad guys don't get in. But when they do get in, we need a better way of responding. And it looks like we're starting to think about responding. And, Cycode is talking about using AI to fix things faster, understand how to fix things. If you've ever gone through the process of trying to fix a vulnerability and you walk through the journey of that, sometimes it looks like you should have a PhD. It's not easy. It doesn't just say, here's a Git repo that has a fix in it, go pull this in. You have a lot of work to do to remediate some of this code. So AI is where we need to apply AI in the app security problem. So yes, I believe this will make a big difference, but code, it will never be perfect. And there will always be vulnerabilities that make it to production. We're not going to be able to stop chaos any more than we can stop people from making bad decisions and who they talk to and give their money to. It's just one of those problems.
And there will always be new vulnerabilities discovered after we deploy code. So we're always going to have some sort of issue. But
at least in this case, what they're saying is we're going to go look at the structure of the code. We're going to go look at the architecture of the code. And we're going to do more than just find a known vulnerability and say, don't put that in there. It is helping us it's helping us see the problem in a way that not every single programmer can see it, or not every AI agent who's generating code might understand. It's a broader picture.
Terry, when I look at this, and you've been at this for a long time as well as I have, but you forget. But the amount of technical debt we have on security and vulnerabilities in existing applications is massive. And so we might be at fixing all that legacy code for another decade, or do you think we'll just ignore that and kind of try to be better from
maybe
here?
a combination, because I think a lot of that legacy code does still need to be fixed, right? And all those dependencies, that's the issue too, right? You have one thing that you might look up at that it affects something else. And I think that you're going to have to deal with the legacy, but I also think you have to have this path for moving forward. I was really excited about sort of this report and the opportunities there, because I think it could, mean some great things for advancing security.
I've often wondered, and maybe Alan has an opinion on this, but at what point do I really just spend time fixing a legacy app, or should I just go shoot the thing and replace it with something more modern altogether that runs more securely?
That sounds very logical, but that doesn't happen in the real world. And especially because it's just a security issue. That's certainly not enough for me to throw it out and start over. The world is full of brown, dirty, messy fields, not green fields. And if our answer was always, out with the old, in with the new, what a wonderful world it would be. But that's not the world we live in.
come on, AI agents are going to make it easy to build new software.
No,
We've used tools forever that does exactly that. You pass it a repo and it'll take it from one language to the next and modernize it for you, and then you get to clean it up and push it back out. But it doesn't necessarily fix your vulnerabilities or the architecture around that might encourage vulnerabilities. Let's put it that way.
I'm kind of like Alan, like
Not happy.
So
sort of, creating a whole new thing. I don't know that that's practical or reasonable or what anybody's going to do. It reminds me, I was in Singapore a year and a half ago, and was looking out from this tower, and a business guy that I was having dinner with said, you have to, look past there at the reclaimed lands, right? Because they took land from the sea or whatever. But he was talking to me about how in Singapore with their buildings, you see all these new buildings, right? There are very few old, whatever. He said, oh yeah, every however many years we tear them down and rebuild them. And I was just, startled by that. But it seems to me that that's quite the investment and not so practical everywhere else in the world. And I think maybe the same thing. You have to fix the legacy. So, as much as you'd like to have shiny new stuff.
I also feel like, and maybe this is just me, but so much of our focus these days is still on the source code. Like, we're going to fix the problem at the root, and that's noble. But Alan, as you well know, most of what's running out there in the legacy environment is a bunch of binaries that, I don't really see as many tools out there to go fix the binaries and the things that are actually running.
This is the dirty little secret, right? We saw it during COVID with the unemployment checks that are on the COBOL system, and we don't have COBOL engineers. But, app modernization proceeds at its own pace. And I'm of the opinion that there's not much any of us can do, because when will an app get modernized? When it pays to get modernized, right? When there is a bottom line benefit to doing that modernization that outweighs the Band-Aid approach to what most of us do, then it gets modernized and you move from the binary to something modern or microservice architectures and all this. But until there's a profit motive there, it don't happen. That's, it's the market work, and it's not a bad thing, maybe.
I can see a model though where that dynamic is gonna, if not change, get accelerated, right? Because the bad guys also have access to the tools that let them scan your code and then identify weaknesses and discover vulnerabilities, and they'll be doing that a whole lot faster, and then they'll be creating the exploit a whole lot faster. So the amount of attacks against software could exponentially increase in the months ahead, to the point where more businesses are going to conclude that running a lot of legacy software is just too risky.
And this is why we get back to the point that we need to understand the things that we're not doing. And I think the things that AI could be doing better is that we don't really understand our risk when we see a vulnerability. So let's say there's some vulnerabilities in some legacy software. Does that ever execute? Does that instruction ever get hit in the binary? Does it actually ever do anything? It could just be a package that was consumed and is sitting there. So we have focused so much on shifting left that we have forgot about shifting right. And what do we need to do to protect the runtime environments, the endpoints, and how do we get fixes to them as soon as possible? The government right now, I think it's the Navy, is looking at trying to come up with a way to fix a vulnerability without source code, right? Do some kind of a binary extraction and fix something and push it back in without the source code. I don't think it's possible. And even if it is possible, the first time you re-release the code back into the production environment, you just erased what you did. So we have a lot of work to do on how to fix fast, how to make sure we can remediate within, in minutes, not the months that it's taking today.
So mitigating and remediating vulnerabilities you can do without necessarily changing code. You can shut off certain port accesses, or use some sort of firewalls, or picket fence kind of stuff. Um, and those might be band-aids until you can get to the source code. But, will AI, let's get back to the topic at hand. Will AI security apps, security agents help us? Chris, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I think this is a good, good example of definitions and terminology, because what everybody's saying is true, and we're talking about this as artificial intelligence. And to be clear, what we call artificial intelligence today is neither artificial nor intelligence. It is pattern matching at scale. That's why these large language models work. We can get into the human language level of pattern matching, and this is what we're talking about, for security and code. And it's a wonderful tool, like all the other applications for, again, what we are currently calling artificial intelligence. But it has limitations. So you want to apply this pattern matching at scale to, the kind of trivial chat GPT, human language matching, pattern matching, search the internet kind of thing. Recognize that it's going to be wrong a fair bit of the time, but it saves a lot of time. You want to use it in this case, for your massive, all the things everybody's talking about here. Great. It probably saves you a lot of time, but it's not going to be right all the time. And if you don't know that, then you just picked up a hammer and you think it's an axe. It's not going to work out well. These are tools that have a certain function, a certain definition, and literally the term we keep using to refer to them is misleading, and it sets the wrong expectations. It's not artificial and it's not intelligent.
That sounds like the opening for another artificial intelligent. No, artificial or intelligent. Speak among yourselves.
I'm not sure people care how it's done, as long as it gets done and it's automatic, right?
Yep.
All right. Automation right now for DevOps pipeline is critical. We've got to figure out a way to get the fix back through as fast as we can.
Agreed. All right, we got to take a break on this one. Let's come back, and we've got a new royal edict coming down from Washington. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and there's yet another executive order being kicked around in Washington. This one kind of talks about directing the Department of Labor and the Department of Education to inject more training and education for AI into the curriculums of K through 12 schools. There's a little irony in the fact that the president is ordering anything about the Department of Education these days, since this is the department he's trying to eliminate. But Alan, in theory, is this an order you can get behind?
Well, look, any order that comes from up high, from His Highness, right, is something we should put behind us. But that being said, the lunacy and hypocrisy of this whole thing. Yes, Mike, you pointed out the obvious. He's directing the Department of Education that he's closing down to go do something about education. But wait, there's more. This is the same man who says we should let the states and the local school boards and the parents decide what curriculum it is and what books they could read or not read and what we should burn and what names we can call our kids and everything else. But now he's setting edicts from up high for us to go do this. This is the reality of the lunacy that we live in. Now, is there anything wrong with saying, hey, we should make AI part of their K-12 curriculum? Absolutely not. I think we absolutely should do that. And it would be good if we had a functioning democracy and government where you had a federal Department of Education who can make those things happen. But you can't talk out of one side of your mouth and say that and then do the kinds of things out of the other side of the mouth that this government does and expect to have any respect from the world and your constituents. So that's the real problem here, right? Another baby gets thrown out with the bathwater. We should be thinking about this as a country. We should be making sure our kids are AI native.
So the irony of this is, let's assume that this gets, embraced by school districts. They're going to go look at countries that may have already started doing this to build a curriculum, right? Because what are you going to teach somebody in, under third grade? Let's just say that. Well, in Finland, they've started doing this. And you know where they started? Fake news. How do you identify a fake AI post? And there was I think it was CBS Sunday Morning had a piece on this, and I read about it and I was fascinated. And they said that an 8-year-old in Finland can identify a fake news faster than a 30-year-old in the US. So let's hope that we do this, because if they do start an AI program and they start teaching us how to identify what's AI generated, which is a perfect thing to start doing at first grader, then we're going to have a much more educated public in 10 or 15 years. And maybe we won't find ourselves in the place that we're at, where fake news is driving the discourse of our country. So I'm for it.
Agreed.
I read an interesting article yesterday. Do you know of all of the, baby boomers, Gen X's, yada, yada, of all of the, generational groups in our country, who is most susceptible to fake news and believing,
I would say teens.
Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Yeah.
Gen Z, because they get almost entirely all of their news from social media. And even though it's almost counterintuitive, because you think of them as digital natives. And so they would have learned by now. But no, they're perfectly content feeding at the trough.
They've not been.
And Finland has recognized this because they've had so much coming from Russia. So they've had to figure out a way to defend their population against this kind of onslaught of
And
bad
they're in agreement
information.
that Russia's bad. At this point, they don't want to be influenced by them. Yeah. We kind of haven't come to that agreement in this country in a while. I was going to say, too, that it is a little surprising, but they do get their information from social media. They also haven't been disciplined, as maybe in my generation, to be discerning about news and news sources and information. I mean, maybe it was a luxury to grow up when there were, and then not that they were perfect, but respected newscasters who, you sort of trusted what you were saying.
There were less news sources, right? You had 3 or 4. If you grew up in New York, we had, would we have 7 news stations, and they all had news. 7 TV stations, they all had news. And then you had your newspapers but today, a Gen Z person can't distinguish between PBS NewsHour and I don't know, name one of the disgraced Fox newscasters who are out doing their own thing now.
There's not currently a secretary of
or Joe Rogan for that matter.
Also, they don't.
Well, they
see
don't,
a
and they don't
difference.
understand what has gone behind or the scenes at a place like, say NPR or the New York Times. Even there's a whole editorial process. There's a whole discipline there, right? For an editorial.
So
So being able to actually understand how to use a prompt in ChatGPT, Chris's recommendation to older people, if you think you're getting scammed, use ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. It may take some time to train most people to actually do research using ChatGPT. So the more we can teach that, the more we can get more educated people voting. Okay, well, that's all I'm saying.
I mean, let me break my. Let me jump in if you don't mind. I'm going to break my typical optimistic Pollyanna view. Well, I agree with all the points we made. Absolutely not. To be clear, this is not what any of you are talking about. This is a political regime that has appointed the autism czar. We know about this guy, David Geiger, right? Whose father lost his medical license because he, with his son, who's now responsible for the autism task force, injected autistic kids my son's age, when they were kids, and blocked puberty and caused osteoporosis and should be in jail. Right. The African American Museum at Smithsonian, by executive order, is ordered to not talk about race or previous American citizens like slave owners in any bad way. And by the way, race is a biological fact. So no, this is, despite the fact that this makes sense on the surface, this is one of these cases, and my political views are not any secret, but this is standard security. You have to be practical and pragmatic about what's being used in what context. And unless you actually believe all of these things this administration believes, then you cannot be in favor of this because you know what they're going to do with it. This is Elon Musk and a group of these folks putting indoctrination powered by AI in the U.S. Educational system. So no.
Without any regard to how it might be used. But so here's the thing.
Oh, they're regarding that very specific aim.
They know how they want it to be.
Here's the thing to take. Here is the thing to take away from all of this. To Alan's earlier point, education is run by the states. So if you're going to be thinking about where you want your kids trained and how you want your kids trained in the age of AI, you might want to think long and hard about what state you're going to live in, because it's going to be different in all 50 of them. So you might want to think about moving if you're in a state that is either A, not taking it seriously, or B, to Chris's point, is using it to advance an agenda that has something to do with some vendor who's fond of Trump. Think long and hard about where you're going to live in the next decade.
I mean, hypothetically, Mike, that's why someone might move from Florida to New York.
That's shocking, and whose youngest kid is now on the honor roll. Go figure.
Or maybe that's why New Mexico's population has exploded the last 4 years. It's exploded.
Well, I don't know. I'm still calling it.
I think it's New America now, isn't it?
I still do. No.
I think it was. Anyway, hey, wait, I can see where this is going to descend into the first couple, but you got to pull a plug. We will be back tomorrow from RSA conference. Very excited. No, we're not. This is Monday. No, we're not. We'll be back here again, but I'll be at RSA tomorrow. I won't be on. Mike, you got the ship.
All right. We will be talking about security, surprisingly, though.
Okay. Without for until though, everybody, hey, we've got a great lineup of Techstrong TV following today's Techstrong gang, so stay tuned for that. And until next time, Terry, thanks for joining the gang.
Yeah.
We look forward to having you on often.
Had a great time.
Tracy, as always, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
Chris, am I going to see you at RSA? You're sitting this one out.
I am sitting this one out. It's hard to do, but have fun for me.
I'll tell them you said hi. All righty. Bye-bye, everyone. We're out.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, and we're back here on Techstrong TV. By the time you watch this, I'll probably be out in San Francisco at the RSA conference where, the world gathers to talk security. But one of the, besides AI, which everyone's talking about, one of the hot topics in security is the future of what we call quantum security, right? A lot of people were very afraid of quantum, frankly. Is it going to break all of our encryptions and our RSA encryption and and so forth. It happens to be an area where NIST got involved, the industry has gotten involved. We have some quantum-proof algorithms, but there's more to quantum security than that. I want to introduce you to Andres Chair. Andres is the Vice President, Principal Analyst at Forrester, covering this topic. Let's welcome to Techstrong TV. Hi, Andres. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alan, for having me.
My pleasure.
Really good to be here. I'll be at RSA as well next week, so interested parties will likely see me there. So
we will
that's all good.
We're on Broadcast Alley all week, over in Moscone West. So if you find yourself over there, come by and say hello.
Yeah, well, definitely. I shall do that.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. So I'm an analyst here at Forrester. I look at encryption, cloud encryption technologies. So that's and then cloud security on a broader scale. Identity and access management, mainly the customer-facing side of things. That also has a lot of authentication use in public key infrastructure, or PKI, as well as fraud management. So definitely adjacencies to quantum security, quantum safe, quantum-proof encryption.
Sure.
Okay. So a lot of questions from all sorts of end users on the topic, and they're definitely happy to kind of share some of what we're telling our customers here on these advisories.
Sure. So, Andres, as I mentioned in the opening, for once, it seemed like we got out ahead of an issue, right? And over the last couple of years, NIST has spearheaded a move towards enabling, as they call it, quantum-proof algorithms, which should theoretically protect, our encrypted data in a quantum world.
Absolutely.
What's your thoughts on that?
So it is absolutely great, right? I mean, this is a great first step. The national standards body in the U.S. obviously has done this, and there's other agencies, other similar kinds of agencies with similar mandates globally that have done similar things. The fun part is that the approved and sanctioned algorithms are not necessarily the same, right? So there's this slight differences between countries as to what the country's national standards body or regulator thinks will be the nirvana and the best kind of quantum safe encryption mechanism that quantum computers won't be able to break, hopefully, right? So there's some fragmentation already. Google has also been kind of announcing their own algorithm, right? That's another kind of thing, a little bit of a monkey wrench in the machinery. Hopefully these, kind of standards wars or encryption standard kind of algorithm disagreements, wars, and contention will settle, and the world will settle on a handful of technologies, right? So that's all good. The other aspect that is generally problematic is basically just the sheer kind of adoption, right, of currently or quantum vulnerable encryption. So this is mainly asymmetrical cryptography, RSA, elliptical curve cryptography, the Diffie-Hellman set of methods. These are probably the highest adopted, largest footprint encryption mechanisms that will be, kind of impacted by quantum computers. The question is when, right? I mean, everybody asks that question. It's basically the next 10 years. It's about 50%, right, that this will happen. So it's not there's no Y2K like kind of deadline, right? The 1st of January 2000, the whole world will come to an end if we don't do something. That's one. And two, when a national security agency has a quantum computer, you're not going to be able to maybe even read about it on, in the media, right? They'll probably want to keep it hush hush for as long as
it makes you think possible. They don't have one already.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. So that is entirely possible. So basically these are some of the challenges. And then there's, beyond the adoption, right, is basically the speed with which companies can actually implement data discovery, data prioritization, and what we call crypto agility. So crypto agility in essence is basically a huge undertaking, and it really means, in simple terms, moving away from the current hard-coded, algorithms and all infrastructure, software, libraries, etc., such that the algorithms are readily replaceable and pluggable without having to rip apart the software or the library itself, right? So it's a lot more modular, pluggable architecture and infrastructure for cryptography that, we would definitely want to see out there. And going there is, like I said, is just because of the breadth and depth of in-house developed software and commercial off-the-shelf software from vendors. It's a huge undertaking.
Sure. I mean, to me, it sounds like it's going to be a race to the bottom, so to speak, of how fast can we upgrade. It's always the same story. Greenfield, those are easy. We'll build them with quantum-proof algorithms from the get-go, and they're fine. It's the brownfield, the dirty stuff that we need to update.
100%.
And how fast, and there's so much of it, as you say, how fast can we update it versus how fast can the bad guys infiltrate it using quantum? And that's really the point. If it's nation states that we're talking about, China or Russia, or even Iran or, North Korea, they may have a quantum computer in order to break, older algorithms, older encryption, much sooner than, let's say, gangs, your typical cyber threat gangs, I mean, getting a hold of a quantum computer is going to be out of their touch, I would imagine, for a long time.
Yes, 100%. And the speed with which these algorithms can be broken to. So it's like how soon and then basically how fast the decryption will happen. And keep in mind, Alan, right, that there's a lot of harvest now, decrypt later,
yes, there is
too, right? So there's a lot of data that's been already communicated in an encrypted,
salted,
hitherto thought to be, basically, but encrypted, fashion over the internet, which is sensitive, difficult, kind of really confidential, et cetera, to be protected. And, obviously, everybody has been able to harvest these data pieces. And once the quantum computers are there, you can actually decrypt these data pieces. So, and obviously, there's data that is more likely to change, right? Like over a period of years, right? Like next 2 to 3 years, like stock prices will likely change, right? And national news headlines will likely change. And there's a lot of volatile, data pieces. But, some of the highly confidential pieces of information as to how to build like a nuclear warhead, right? Or how to, where the silos are for ICBMs, right? These things will not change, right? So it is really difficult to kind of change all this information. So part of what will have to happen, right, to kind of curb the impact of decrypting the harvested now the kind of data is going to be, in addition to all these problems of cryptography, library replacements, retroactive work, is going to be data decoys, right? So basically disinformation and spreading, conflicting, updated information pieces around, all these previously static kind of data pieces that will confuse the adversaries, right? So that even if they're able to decrypt that data, they'll be able to kind of not necessarily make a decision as to which, kind of encrypted them, then that by them decrypted data is the truth or the most up-to-date version, right? So there's definitely that piece there as well, which is also an interesting, kind of conversation we have with organizations.
It's interesting times. Yeah, we were talking offline. I told you we did a story on Techstrong Gang the other day where a company out of Australia using quantum developed a sort of like an alternative GPS, obviously not using GPS, using quantum instead, a system for navigation 10x more accurate than GPS and spoof proof and interference proof. So they say. But again, it's why we can't have nice things on the internet. right? If they're using it, the bad guys will be using it too. And,
Yeah, that's one.
you know, you mentioned, 50% in 10 years is what we can hope to upgrade to a quantum proof type of algorithm and so forth. But, when Forrester advising clients, where do they see the quantum adoption curve?
So basically, we have research on emerging technologies of which quantum computing and quantum security are part of, right? Obviously with the current, 100, 150, non-error corrected qubits, right? It's still, early to talk about, quantum computers that can do anything really helpful, but the adoption of the appearance of quantum chips that will likely be horizontally scalable, right? That's definitely going to be an interesting. The Microsoft, Google, and other quantum chips that are definitely coming along. We'll see horizontal scaling, right? And that can lead to some advances. I mean, we've heard estimates that it takes about 10,000 error-corrected qubits to be able to break the asymmetrical encryption algorithms. Current chips are 100, kind of non-error-corrected qubits. So you take about 10 non-error-corrected qubit to get one, error-corrected qubit. So 100 to 1,000 chips, right, in an array, right, is starting to kind of basically at a point, if you can use them in a cluster environment and in a grid, right, to be able to kind of deploy them against, these algorithms. So definitely, the time is going to be much, much shorter, maybe than this 10 years, right, or even 5 years, because of all these advances and breakthroughs and kind of technology accelerated innovation that basically will have a positive feedback, a loop impact on the technology.
Sure. So you referenced Google and Microsoft. Of course, Google announced a quantum chip, I think, called Willow, right? That they're working on. And then, not to be outdone, Microsoft announced basically inventing a new state of matter for their new quantum chip that, they think will have commercial applications soon. Of course, soon is relative. But Andres, for people maybe who want to stay on top of what Forrester is saying in this, burgeoning new era, how, do you have any reports you can send them to recently?
Definitely. So we actually have published the state of quantum security, as well as the future of quantum security. These are documents that we can, definitely, reference here. And then we are also working on the architect's guide to quantum security. That's going to be the TRIAS third piece, right? And this is again all part of Forrester's emerging technology, report, portfolio and coverage. So
I haven't checked yet. Is there any quantum security sessions over at RSA?
There's definitely the innovation sandbox that's happening. There's a number of startup vendors that work in, being able to create proxies of upgraded algorithms, encryption algorithms that are quantum safe and use them as shims between, legacy vulnerable algorithms in network security, PKCS and other areas, right? So the work has definitely begun, and the vendor investment and the venture capital investment has started to kind of prioritize these technologies. It again is basically the vast array of infrastructure that we have here, as well as the libraries and really commercial products that will have to be kind of all looked at, investigated, upgraded, as well as the data, right? So basically, discovering and prioritizing data is what we really tell people. Know what you need to protect, identify the top 10% most sensitive data, and focus on the infrastructure that handles that data or stores that data or transmits that data, and basically put your initial quantum safe crypto agility efforts in that domain.
Excellent. Andres, we're about out of time. Hey, enjoy RSA. Do stop by and see us. We'll put the
Absolutely.
links here for the Forrester reports and notes. Thanks for coming on Techstrong TV. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
My pleasure, Alan.
Keep us
talking to you.
posted.
Cheerio.
Andres Char, Vice President, Principal Analyst Forrester here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
And we're back at Elysian Team 25. I'm John Swartz, Senior Content Writer of Techstrong TV, Techstrong Gang, Techstrong Group. A lot of Techstrongs. Anyway, I'm here with Allison Husled, who's the Head of Product System of Work at Elysian.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct,
Okay.
John. Yes.
And I know the linchpin or the key, the cornerstone of what you do is something called Teamwork Collection. Can you tell me what that is?
Sure, yeah, so we announced it today during the keynote.
Okay.
Teamwork Collections, our new offering that brings together Jira, Confluence, Loom, and along with some Rovo agents for teamwork to help become the common language for all teamwork.
Okay. And what customer challenges are you trying to solve with this?
That's a great question. There are a handful of ones that we're trying to solve, but mostly it's really around how do you align all of your work that you're doing to your goals? How do you plan and track work together as a team? How do you then unleash the knowledge of your team across your entire organization? And then, of course, bringing the power of AI teammates to the table with them.
So how, within that equation, where does AI fit in, or how does AI change what you're doing or influence what you're doing, or is that just part of the basic plan of the Teamwork Collection?
Got it. Today we announced that Rovo will be included in every Jira, Confluence, and Jira.
You said Rovo, the search?
Search, chat, and
Okay.
AI agents as well for specific types of things, like for teamwork, will be included in your Jira, Confluence, and Jira Service Management subscriptions going forward. So it's basically part of the base plan now with the collection, with all of those products included.
So we talked to the head of product at Rovo, Gunchen, and he mentioned this importance of searching across enterprises and apps, which I think is increasingly going to be a challenge in terms of finding data across a landscape of applications and systems. Is that kind of where this kind of fits into their element of what you announced?
That's one piece of it, certainly the enterprise search piece, but it's also how do you bring those specific agents to work with you as a fellow teammate to help you be more effective and efficient moving work forward as a team.
See, you hit on something that it kind of confounds me at times, and it has nothing to do with your company, but just in general. I mean, I've been writing about AI agents for several months, it seems. There's an announcement almost every week.
Sure.
There's an abundance of them, and since it's like a sensory overload. And I'm wondering from a customer standpoint whether they feel that same way. They feel overwhelmed by all these options of agents, and how do they fit together? Do they fit at all? How do you silo them, or do you silo them? Is that something that you're hearing from the customers? It's just like, how do I address all these options that are coming out at me seemingly every week?
It's not something I personally hear a lot, though a lot of the way we've introduced agents into our experiences is really very much in context of what you're trying to do.
Right.
And so for things like, let's say you're in Jira and you want to get help with writing your work item, or if you're in Confluence and you want to turn content into a work item in Jira, you can basically use those agents right there in place within that experience. So it's much more organic, or it fits into exactly what you were doing in your flow.
Yeah.
So it's not so orthogonal to what you were doing.
Yeah, so I mean, I was like wondering, like looking forward, as this starts to gain traction, and it is within enterprises. So conceivably, as a company, I might have 5 different AI agents doing 5 different tasks. Maybe each of them is overseen by a traffic cop of sort, or a super agent. Would there be a coordination between agents from different vendors? I'm just asking this as a reporter. I just don't know how this is gonna come out.
Yeah, right now we've been very focused on the agents that we're providing our customers, along with giving them the ability to create their own agents. So
Okay.
haven't focused, at least myself personally, too much yet on bringing in those third-party vendors.
Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. No, let's start with first things first, I guess.
Yeah.
So what are some of the innovations across Jira, Confluence and Loom that you're most excited about?
Yeah, so within the context of Jira specifically, one of the things we are introducing is something called custom project templates, and that gives our customers the opportunity to recreate or build common workflows for their organization to reuse and repeated patterns. So if, let's say, for instance, in the session I did earlier today, we walked through a vendor onboarding process. If you've nailed that process, you want to be able to repeat it over and over again. So now you can use these custom project templates to bring in things like workflows, fields, and really just repeat that very well worn process over and over again rather than reinventing the wheel every time. So that's one of the items I'm pretty excited about.
I may have asked this question already, but maybe I'll rephrase it. So with Rovo fitting into the Teamwork Collection, what AI-driven enhancements does it offer to Teamwork? Like how can it raise the level of what you're doing, and can you give me an example of how that might fit in?
Yeah, so one of the examples would be, so let's say, and I mentioned it I believe before, but just in case, in the context of, let's say, a Confluence page, and you've got a bunch of action items you wrote down, you took some meeting notes. Right. In that context, you can just highlight those meeting notes, and AI will automatically create those into Jira work items. So that's one piece. Another piece I haven't mentioned before is we now have Loom AI for meetings, where you can invite our Loom AI note taker into your meeting, and it can take notes for you, so you can focus on the conversation and not worry about jotting down all the notes as you go. Creates a written record of what you just talked about, all the action items, so you can focus on the conversation and then get back to work when you need to with all of that recorded already for you.
Okay. So I should mention to the viewers out there that our colleague Adrian Bridgewater has written about teamwork among the rest of his coverage of the keynote speech at Atlassian. I was going to ask you about the keynote, actually. I know you saw it. What was it about that, just in general, that stood out to you? Were there any takeaways that you think are worth sharing with viewers?
I think a couple of the big takeaways I would call out as it relates to Teamwork Collection 2 specifically is Rovo for everyone now. Again, we're giving Rovo away with your subscription for Jira, Confluence, and Jira Service Management. So anyone using Teamwork Collection will get access to those AI capabilities immediately as part of their subscription. Our platform apps also is a really important piece of how we're bridging and bringing those experiences together across all of those apps in Teamwork Collection, like goals and having those embedded in Jira, for instance. So I think between the platform apps and bringing Rovo to everybody using the Atlassian set of apps, particularly Teamwork Collection, is going to really supercharge those teams to move work forward.
So I was going to ask you, just in terms of about search.
Yeah.
When you look at something like Rovo and then compare it to the traditional search, this is just kind of a hypothetical. How do you think about this? I mean, in a sense, before, search was about helping consumers find things they didn't know about. The flip side with this is you're trying to find things you know about but forgot where you put it, or you're trying to find connections with the thing. So it's like you're searching for things you know exist, but you're not necessarily sure where they are.
Right. Yeah, so in this case, what I think is great about our search capability with Rovo is that it's not just looking at the Atlassian tool chain. So let's say, I have this Confluence page or this Jira work item, I can't remember what it was. It's also looking in, you've got Slack connected or Figma connected or any of your third-party tools as well. It's searching across those along with the Atlassian tools. And so you can actually, you might not have remembered it was in a Slack message, but you find it there.
Exactly. I mean, I don't, that's one of the things. I used to work at a place called Dow Jones, and we had the Okta board.
Okay.
There were 50 different apps on there, and I would struggle at times to figure out where something was, and I would almost invariably go to IT and try to track down where could this conceivably be. And now in a sense you just have this one source that directs you to what you need to find, and there your solution is in front of you.
Yeah, as long as you've connected all of the apps you're using with the
that's
Rovo,
true.
You got to connect them in. But once they're connected, we can find it wherever it is.
All right. What feedback have you received from early access customers regarding collection? What are they telling you, and how is it influencing your company's product development?
Yeah, one of the biggest things we're hearing is how they're rolling it out to teams outside of their technical teams. So obviously we've had a really strong hold within technical teams historically, but all of the innovations and experience updates we've brought to Jira in particular, but all of the products really is meaning they're rolling it out more actively to all of their organization. They're seeing a lot of value in Loom as well, which is newer to our portfolio. But if you put that alongside Jira Confluence and the experiences we've built to really connect those together, they're seeing a lot of productivity enhancements from that in particular, and really like just cutting down a lot of meetings, being more efficient, getting projects done faster in general.
How long, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been at Atlassian?
Oh, that's a bit of a trick question.
No, because there is a method to the madness of the seemingly random nature of the question.
Yes, so I've been at Atlassian for 5 months, and this is my second stint at Atlassian. So
you
I've
were
been here before.
Oh, so you're like a boomerang employee.
I am a boomerang.
I've done that. I've done that. Can I actually ask you about that? So when you were first at the company, what made you decide to leave, or what prompted you to leave?
I'd been here for 8.5 years, and so there's nothing particular that prompted me to leave, other than there was another opportunity I found, and you're like, okay, 8.5 years is a good stint, but I should probably learn other things or see other parts of the industry, and so I did that for a bit. During a startup, wasn't quite my cup of tea, and so I took some time off and found out about the system of work and them hiring for the role here and our investments we're making in system of work. And I was super excited about what the company's doing in this area.
So it is interesting when you go back to a company for the second time, you come back with a different perspective, maybe more of an appreciation, but you know how it works, but you also see things that you might be able to bring that weren't existing there before. Is that something, this is like very, I don't know. I don't want to go too deep, but I'm just thinking of this as a philosophical question in terms of working at the same place twice.
I think you get to have that perspective of having left and come back. There is learnings you take from the additional places you've been in between, but also things you appreciate that even more than you've appreciated the first time. And so I think it's the combination of those two that makes it really effective to come back. You've got a lot of the context from the history, so you're not starting from scratch.
Yeah.
But you also have some other learnings from seeing these domain areas outside of the company that you can bring to your work that actually makes it much richer, I think.
And because of the rise of AI, do you almost look at Atlassian as a different company than the one you worked at before? Like, is it pivoted in a different direction, or is this just kind of a continuation?
This feels more of like an evolution rather than a pivot. Like, this feels like it's building more organically and naturally on top of what we've done. But having been here for so long before, I can see the increments over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all the narrative continues.
It feels organic. Yeah.
Okay. Organic's a good word. Thank you, Allison. Thank you very much for being with us. That's just our greatest interview. We'll be back with more at Techstrong TV, and keep on watching.
Hello and welcome to the Techstrong AI podcast. I'm Amanda Rosani, and with me today I have Anita Kurkovska, and she is the head of growth at Vellum. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for inviting me at your podcast. Like, I've seen some of the previous presentations and like the talks that you guys covered. It all seems so fun.
Oh, thank you. I learn a lot. I'm happy to have you on the show today. So Can you share a little bit about Vellum? What services do you provide?
Yeah, so Vellum is an AI development platform. We support the whole life cycle for companies who want to build with AI. So think about if product teams would like to prototype with AI, if they want to identify whether using AI is actually useful for a problem to be solved for the user, they use our prototyping tool to test whether this is possible. Once they figure out what works, then they work with engineering, again, using our product to operationalize the whole thing. And then they use evaluations to stress test it, to prepare it for production. And then, the whole cycle also covers putting it in production. And it's an interesting loop that happens between like prototyping and having something in production, because interestingly enough, with AI, it never ends when you put it in production, because AI models are so non-deterministic. They have high variance in their outputs. And so controlling for those outputs is like the biggest task to be done from like PMs and engineers. And so once they have it in production, then we provide the right tools for them to observe and capture real world interactions. And then those teams basically feed that data into the product and then evaluate and test. And like it all goes in this continuous loop. you will forever work on your AI product.
Absolutely. And I imagine as they're using these tools too, they realize that their needs have changed or they need other solutions. And so constantly adapting the technology.
Absolutely. I feel like working with AI these days, it's so dynamic with like different models just showing up every day. Just like the last 2 weeks, I think we had around 4 new AI models from OpenAI, from NVIDIA, and I think like NVIDIA launched the best open source model. So it's definitely a continuous work that all these teams are doing, not only to switch a model or to test a new model, but then like the requirements are changing constantly. And working with AI, it requires for that like active analytics and observations. And like if you're building more complex agentic workflows, observability and evaluations, it even becomes even more important because an agent can take so many different directions because it's autonomous. And like you need to be able to capture all of those, analyze why an agent made a certain decision, and then be able to steer it better in the next one. So definitely a lot of work to be done. And yeah, I agree with you. Teams are learning every day using these tools. They're just like testing new things, finding out new possibilities for the product. And it's honestly amazing to see it.
Bellum recently released a state of AI development report, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And can you share some of the key findings of that report?
Yeah. So there were a few quite interesting results from that report. None of them were surprising, I would say, at least for us, because we're in this field just like working with companies, helping them do this stuff. So we see it every day. But like half of the developers that we interviewed for this report, they are all building an agentic workflow in 2025. So it's not at all something that we want companies to be building. They are already building it. And like all of these are enterprise applications, but like we can debate all day what is an AI agent, like what does it actually entails and all of that. That's the first major result that, it just proved that we're in this agent era where everyone is building agentic workflows. Everyone wants to automate their job. Everyone wants these LLMs to actually do the job for them. However, in a contrast to that, the results actually showed that only 25% of those same developers have actually something in production. So something challenging is happening. Like, is it hallucinations? Is it misalignment between the product, the legal team? Like, there's so many high-risk jobs to be done, especially with bigger companies, especially for companies who work in highly regulated spaces, right? So there's so much coordination that needs to be done. So many things need to be right for your team to be able to publish this in production. And it's quite interesting. Like everyone is building something, like less than 25% are actually putting this in production. So there is a lot to be done in evaluations, in observability, just like testing these models across the spectrum of like, are they calling the right tools? Are they interacting with other models in the right way? Is my output correct? Do I need to check for context relevancy? Like we've seen a lot of these interesting concepts that developers were using last year and the year before that, where we said, okay, well, LLMs are quite useful. They're smart, but they don't know our data. They don't have the context of our data. And so 2 years ago, everyone started to build RAG-based chatbot. That's retrieval augmented generation chatbot. And they all were trying to use this new tag, this new vector databases to embed all of their business data in a fast and like scalable way to be able to provide this data to an LLM model at inference time, right? So once someone is interacting with my chatbot, I actually want my LLM to be able to look at my data and then answer with some context relevancy. And so like, if you think about it, there's so many things and so many loops and so many things being done in parallel, and the LLM by itself is non-deterministic. And so it makes sense that only 25% of developers have actually something in production. And when we asked them, what are the biggest challenges? And like, for obvious reasons, they all said like hallucinations, but like, that's the number one thing that you think about. But what I would say, something that we see lately is it's a misalignment between the product and engineering team when they work on these AI products.
So communication is the issue.
It's mostly aligning on the things that they care about and the things that they want to do. And I can expand on that. So like, let's say, for example, we worked with Redfin last year. They were building their own chatbot to serve their customers when they're looking for houses to buy or to rent. And so because they work in this highly regulated space, they needed to be able to put clear guardrails and constraints to the model on how the model should actually recommend you places to live. It shouldn't discriminate based on any of the protected demographic characteristics protected by the latest law that was just passed. And so doing that, you can imagine how hard it is. Like, how can I manage this thing that I don't know how it actually comes up with these answers, right? And so interestingly enough, their product team is the one that cares about how this output is going to be created in production. Engineers, they don't care about that for obvious reasons. Like, that's how products are built. Product cares about like the user journey and how the users are interacting with the product, and engineers are here to just like do the thing and build the functionalities around it. But for so long, because the field of AI felt like very technical, every company just relied on their engineering teams. And so they became the biggest bottleneck, because we expect the engineers to prompt these models. So we expect them to write the prompts for these models. We expect them to orchestrate their backend workflows to be able to productionize a solution. We expect engineers to evaluate and test, basically do unit tests, right? To test the workflow end to end, to be able to find some like regressions or like ways on how it can improve the output. We expect for them to actually plan for this whole thing. Like, what should be the outcome? How should I code this thing? Which concept should I utilize versus which ones I should avoid? Memory, long-term memory, short, like there's so many things that need to be done. And then in production, what do I do with my product now? Like for real world data, your product might be just performing so much differently than with the test data as you were building it. And so because companies rely heavily on engineers, they became the biggest bottleneck. And with that, product managers and product teams are now taking the lead. And that collaboration between product and engineers need to happen sooner rather than later, so that goals are aligned, necessities are satisfied, product cares about like the output, developers should operationalize this thing, should add like error logic management, guardrails, like everything that a good engineer does. But product needs to own this process. And there is a certain third team within this whole group. Those are the subject matter experts. In the case with Redfin, I know that they work with their legal team, who was actually creating a lot of the test cases in order for the product and engineering team to test their workflows on. So they were basically writing like question answer pairs that the product team was passing throughout the workflow that they built, and that they were marking it, whether it's true or not. And they were going back to their prompt to then optimize it. And like, as I'm saying this, you can imagine like how long the process is, like that whole back and forth. And imagine if only one person is doing it or one team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because this is a conversation we were just talking about this morning, and that being that the engineers need to think more like product managers because they're creating a product for their users.
Yep. And it goes vice versa. Like these days, honestly, we're seeing that product managers are becoming more technical. And in the age of AI, the product manager role will become so much more technical. It's probably going to be like product engineering, because we still require so much more adjustments made on these workflows by the product people. And there is no other way than taking the product people to actually prompt these models to be able to think about, what's the workflow that we want to create, or what's the experience that we want to create for the user, and what are the goals that we're optimizing for. And because this whole process never ends, the product team is always involved.
Yeah, I feel like also just across the board, I'm hearing more and more roles being blended.
Yeah,
So many different types of roles,
absolutely.
people expecting to be wearing multiple hats.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we can also talk about like junior developers. Like these days, I feel like the companies that we're working with, they're not even thinking of hiring junior developers. It's mostly blending within other functions within the company who are, adopting these more technical roles or technical skills when it comes to AI development. It's like
Yes.
PMs, they need to understand how to prompt these models. They need to understand which is the best model on the market right now. They need to understand how they can align this model to be able to work in production. Then we have legal. If you're building a marketing AI-powered platform, then the whole team of marketing needs to be able to be part of this whole process. If a healthcare company is building a solution for, let's say, clinicians, and we have one customer that does absolutely the same thing, they're building voice agents for clinicians to use to triage like patients and then answer questions for patients like through the phone. Everything is automated. The AI voice agent, it works 24/7. It doesn't eat, it doesn't get tired. It just works and it works very reliably, right? Um, and so with Relay Health, what is really interesting is that they have a whole team or of care navigators who are now becoming more technical, and they call them content engineers because they work with all these prompts to then adopt the AI's response or the AI's communication that you're going to get on the phone. And they're becoming engineers because they understand how to do that. They're working with technology. They're aligning this technology to work for them so they can automate most of their job and be, more available for more patients. So the patients, they don't fall through the cracks of the healthcare system, which we know is broken.
Yeah. So, from your experience working with a variety of companies,
Mhm.
what tips do you have to make sure they start off on the right foot and they ensure success when it comes to implementing a new technology solution?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I recently talked about on a recent AI summit in New York. Honestly, like how we're thinking about that is this whole cycle of things that you need to do that I just like briefly mentioned. One, for obvious reasons, as I mentioned, like you need to have collaboration to happen between all these functions within your company. But how do you actually enable that? And so what we usually say is like prototyping when you want to initiate a new solution for your company that utilizes AI to do whatever you want that solution to do. It must start with the product team. But how do you give the product team the right tools to be able to simulate that whole conversation that needs to happen with an AI, right? And so far, they've been heavily reliant on the engineering team to put up like a quick demo of some sorts or like to connect some of these models so they can play with it. Or recently, I've heard that a very popular sales AI-powered SDR company, they actually have their product managers in Cursor in their IDEs coding with the developers to test for these models. But like that's not the ideal experience. Not every PM will actually understand, how to code. And so the first step that a company needs to get right is to give the right tools for the product teams to be able to test different models, to test different simulations, like how can I integrate AI within this system versus this? How can I integrate AI with my database versus an external tool? And just providing that visual builder that PMs can use to quickly prototype things. Once they have that working, then PMs would come to board meetings showing demos. So now the conversation is switched from, I think this is going to work, to here is a demo, it actually works. And I didn't even rely on my engineering team. I didn't waste any resources because I got the right tools, right? And so like at that point, decision making becomes easier. Now like the team can say, okay, well, this absolutely works. We might need to do some tweaking. What's the next step? Well, now let's pull the engineers to tell us like what are the best practices? How do we organize this whole thing. What do we need to do? Like, they're absolutely the experts here. Once they do that, then, we have a first version. Once you have that first version that you feel, happy about, that you want to test with some examples, then you pull some subject matter experts. You pull your legal team. Okay, well, there are some laws that we need to abide. We work in this highly regulated space. We care about security. We care about trust. How do we align this according to that? And then they start to write like all these test cases. If a user asks about this, make sure you answer with this. If a user asks another sensitive question, make sure that the model is aligned to say something that actually should be said in production. And so, like, they create like 1,000, if not like 10,000, 50,000, how many examples they might need to be able to stress test this system before they actually put it in production. Because, like, if their solution is very high, if their solution is high risk, then they need to put more time in this stage to test it internally. Once they do that, the whole thing gets passed towards the engineering team. The engineering team is taking this whole thing, thinking that, okay, this is ready for production. Everyone has tested it. We have a green light. It's going to operationalize it. It's going to prepare it for production. And like what we usually like to advise companies is that your AI features should be separately deployed from your main application, because the chances are that you're going to be making more updates to your AI features than your standard software functionalities, right? Because we, again, come back to that concept that we need to update our AI features and we need to tune them even daily, depends on the product. So then they create this whole release management, they put it in production, they have all the right like management policies and all of that. Once it's in production, it's the product team again. Now people are using it. So now we're not only measuring like analytics or user behavior or things like that. We're capturing feedback. And feedback can be implicit or explicit, like when, do you use ChatGPT? I'm assuming you do, like everyone does these days, right? Like ChatGPT would ask you, like, was this answer good or not? That's collecting feedback. So as you vote on that output, OpenAI captures that feedback, and that feedback is stored in the original evaluation table that the product team is looking at. And if they say, okay, well, we got some sensitive outputs in production today, our customers didn't like it for various reasons, let's see how we can update how this workflow works. But there is a tricky and like very interesting procedure here that should be maintained, is that we know that prompts are very sensitive, and you don't want to change a prompt that will solve one case, but that will introduce regressions to other parts of the system. And so having the right tooling around this process as well, like it must be done. Like companies should not overlook this, because changing a prompt can actually introduce a lot of regressions, and you need to be able to capture whether you're doing that before you publish a new update in production. Like those are all of the stages that basically go into this loop that must be done in order for you to have something reliable in production. Anything else, above or like, different from this, missing one piece of the puzzle, it can get you some problems, especially for high risk, solutions.
That was great advice. So if you were going to sum all that up with one key takeaway for our audience today, what would that be?
We usually say test-driven AI development. You need to run a lot of tests. You need to evaluate early. You need to break your workflows in-house. Users should not be breaking it in production. So evaluate early, build confidence early, put it in production, and continuously improve it.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you, Amanda, for the invite again.
And thank you to our audience. Stay tuned. There's more.
This is Techstrong TV.
We are back at Atlassian Team 25 in Anaheim, California. I'm John Swartz with Techstrong Group, and I'm with Andrew Boyaji, who is a DevOps evangelist at Atlassian. And we're going to talk about Williams Racing. which I'm very curious about because I've been to Formula One races and practice laps. I find the whole thing, the technology use, incredible on a global scale and the sophistication of what goes on. So, actually, you know what? I was watching a race. I think the most recent race was a couple of days ago. Was it in Japan, I want to say? And there was the engineering driver, the assistant to the driver who talks directly to him on a headset. The headset said Atlassian on it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make out what they were talking about. I'm wondering if you can explain what that was. I think it was the system of work that they were using, or what was it?
So you mean on the headphones between the driver and the
right?
And the guard?
It was kind of muffled, but they were having a conversation in any event. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I've been lucky enough to work pretty closely with Williams over the last Atlassian Williams Racing over the last couple of months, and that garage technology you're talking about is a really nice highlight of how there's a lot of collaboration involved in Formula One racing actually. So obviously the messages are coming from the driver to the pit wall, and a lot of people are familiar with that after watching Formula One because you hear that in the coverage.
Yes.
But what you don't hear on TV is all the messages that are going through those headphones. In addition to the pit crew, and there's around 80 people who travel to each race. There's actually a whole group of people, around 30, sitting in Williams headquarters in Grove in the UK, and they are constantly in communication with the people who are trackside. So they do. So if you think about it this way, every time the car goes around the track, there's terabytes of data being generated. Now at the track, there's limited ability. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on to analyze that data and to understand what's going on. But in Grove, there's a team of data scientists there who are going through the data and understanding what's happening at a deeper level. So some of the messages you might hear is the driver will say, oh, the car's off balance, or something funny is happening in corner 3 or whatever it is. And so those team of analysts are able to correlate what the driver's saying with the data that's coming out of the car. They can then collaborate with the team who are at the race to say, here are the changes that need to happen to the car on the next pit. So super interesting how much collaboration happens with remote teams and those who are actually at the track.
So years ago, I was lucky enough to cover an F1 race, the first F1 race in Austin, and the Ferrari team led me into their pit crew, and it was like it was like a data center. It was incredible. But what struck me, what was more interesting than anything, was not who was there, but who wasn't and who they were communicating with, and invariably it was someone back in England.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that applies to all the teams, but several teams were doing that, and they had literally they were assessing all the information from multiple sensors from every part of the car, as you said, lap by lap. What I was going to ask you, kind of in that vein, what specific challenges is Williams Racing facing in terms of collaboration, and how are you addressing those issues for them?
Yeah, I mean the challenges at Atlassian Williams Racing are very similar to other organisations, and there's 3 ways that I think that we're going to be able to help them and support them through the transformation that they openly talk about, in the public. And the first one is around team level prioritization. So, like many companies, they set goals at the organisation level, and it's really about at the team level. Then, how do you make sure that all of the work that you're doing ladders up to an outcome that the company is looking to achieve? So the first thing we're going to do is really help, embed those team level goals and make them visible and how they ladder up. The second one is around sharing information inside Atlassian Williams Racing. So if you think about every year, they're building pretty much a whole new car from scratch.
I was just going to ask you. Right.
And so there's a lot of design information. There's a lot of the aerodynamicists do a lot of testing and a lot of modeling. So a lot of data and a lot of documentation is actually generated through people who have very different crafts. So you think about an aerodynamicist to a parts manufacturing process to race engineer. They're very different crafts, but it's helpful for them to be able to see each other's documentation and share information. So the second thing we're going to do is help them unlock that information and help share things more broadly internally. And the third thing that a lot of people think when we talk about software development, everyone says, how is the software development software for the car? And yes, there is some of that, but a lot of the software development is applications that they develop to help in the manufacturing and the production of the car. And so the FIA has a spend cap for every Formula One team, and that spend cap includes software development. So
and it applies, the same cap applies to every team, so it's controlled. So no one has a huge advantage over the others.
That's right.
And in a sense, it's really interesting when you talk about cars. Right, there is like a redesign. So it's almost like working with a startup. The same company, but it's a different company.
Yeah.
To a certain extent every year.
Yeah. Right. And so like the third thing is we're going to help them deliver high quality software at speed. Because that's a competitive advantage. If you're able to develop higher quality software faster than the other Formula One teams, then that's an advantage, because every dollar you do not spend doing that, you can spend doing something else for the car.
In terms of innovation of a car, these are such sensitive machines. Is there a certain part of the car where you can gain is there like a certain, this is kind of a dumb question, but it's like, my dad was an engineer and he always talked about the tire technology, the tires, especially the rear tires. Is there like a certain part of the car or part of the aerodynamics that is where you can gain an edge over others? Like, is everyone trying to gain a competitive advantage from a certain part of the car, or is it does it apply?
It's the aerodynamics, and I'm still learning as well. I'll share with you what I've learned since I've been spending time with them. It's the aerodynamics. So the more downforce the car has, the faster it goes. Essentially, is the simplified version that resonates with me. And so when you think about the software is around designing parts and assessing the downforce changes depending on different iterations that the team are going through. So the higher quality software that they're able to produce, the more close to reality, the more realistic they're able to get with their projections about the changes that different parts will make. And so in a way, the better you get at software delivery, the faster the car will get. Is like both ends of the equation.
So in what ways is AI being leveraged to maximize the impact and accelerate the innovation at Williams Racing?
Yeah, I think it's about the potential for AI, really. And if you, like I said earlier, their challenges are similar to most companies that I do work with. And so around the knowledge, unlocking that knowledge and being able to search and find information. For example, if you use Rovo, which is a part of the Atlassian platform, just to search for information, it won't only just give you, so if I'm searching for a document, it won't only just give me the document. If I use natural language, it'll give me the answer, and it'll give me all the sources for that information as well. So that's a great use for AI, but as well, like they generate a lot of data, the car, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there to use AI.
How long has been your partnership? How many years have you been a partner with Williams Racing?
We just announced it.
Okay. So that's new. All right. Okay. Yeah. And have you worked with any other Formula One racing team before?
Not Formula One, but we do a lot with the automotive industry in general.
Okay.
But Formula One is new.
All right.
But I will say 80% of the other Formula One cars, Formula One teams do use Atlassian software. But we have not gone to this.
But you don't have a corporate you don't have a sponsorship with them. So you said about 80% use it, some part of your technology.
Yes.
Wow, that's a pretty high number.
Yeah.
God, I'm trying to think of anyone who kind of rivals that.
We have pretty good software.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, I heard that here at the show. How do you plan, or how does Atlassian plan to evolve its partnership with Williams Racing in the future to enhance collaboration and performance?
Yeah, I mean, so we're partnering pretty closely with them. We don't consider it a sponsorship, actually. We consider it a partnership. Because it's not just us putting our logo on the car. For example, a few weeks ago, I spent a whole week there with a team. We did a deep dive into developer experience. We worked through, where do we want things to go, how things can go in the future. And we're going to progress that over the next few years as we embed our system of work over there.
Do you have partnerships with other sporting teams or organizations?
No. So we looked at a range of options actually through this process. And
can you tell me some of the other sports you looked into, or?
I think the important thing is why we picked Formula One.
Okay.
And the reason why we picked Formula One is it's got a massive audience.
Yes.
And that's growing pretty rapidly.
It's the most technologically advanced sport, I think.
Yeah. And it's
far.
a really nice intersection of teamwork and technology. So there's that aspect. Obviously, we're targeting enterprise companies a lot more.
Yeah.
And a large percentage of CIOs and CTOs and CEOs at enterprise companies are fans of Formula One. It also allows us to take our technology and display around the world where our customers are.
It's amazing. I guess it's like a Super Bowl every couple of weeks, literally.
It literally
like they have
is,
teams, I think, hopscotching one another across the globe. It's an amazing thing to be a part of. I think it's incredibly exciting, and it's a great exposure. But it's also a good way. It's an ultimate case study or customer study to prove to the world how well your technology works.
Absolutely, and for us, when we're assessing, what we're going to move forward with, we feel, and Atlassian Williams Racing feels that we can really help them on their transformation that they're undertaking. So we're going pretty deep with them to help them improve in the areas they want to improve in.
Hey, well, it sounds like a winning formula, so to speak. Thanks for being with us.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Andrew. That's it. We're going to call it a wrap today at Atlassian Team 25. We will be back tomorrow with more videos and more interviews, and we'll see you then.
This is Techstrong TV.
We are back in Anaheim, California, near Disneyland. This is Atlassian Team 25. I'm John Swartz with Techstrong TV. I'm a senior content writer, and with me is Shamik Sharma, who's the head of product IT solutions at Atlassian. Welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Sure, it's a pleasure to have you. We're going to start with something kind of just basic, but I want to ask you about the most important AI advancements being introduced in Jira Service Management at this show.
Yeah. We're announcing a whole bunch of AI advancements, but I'd like to highlight just 4 of them.
Sure.
First is that inside Jira Service Management, there is something called the Virtual Service Agent that helps agents solve the problems and the tickets that come in. Now we're making the Virtual Service Agent available across a lot more surfaces than it used to be. So previously it was available on the Help Center and in Slack. Now it's available in Microsoft Teams. You can access it over email. And you can also embed a widget, including the Virtual Service Agent, in any website. So that's one, that more surfaces. Second, your agents are only as useful as the knowledge that they can access. So we're expanding the knowledge sources that these agents can access to Google Drive and SharePoint as well. So they get a lot more powerful. And also we're allowing the agents to suggest what knowledge you lack so you can go and improve that. And it even drafts these knowledge articles for you so you can review and expand your knowledge base. So that makes the agents much better. The third thing we are doing is adding agents into your portfolio so that these agents can actually do the work for your agents. So for example, when service requests come in, the service triage agent helps you prioritize the requests so that you can work on the most important ones. It fixes the subject headings so that it's more relevant. It fixes the direction and the priority of those requests and so on. So it just makes the work of your human agents a lot more easier. They don't have to work on the peripherals, and they can actually get focused on the actual tickets content. And the last is on the operations side, we're doing a whole bunch of things to help people identify the root cause of an incident so that they can get to the problem very quickly.
You know, the interesting theme I get from this show is that with all the AI agents that are flooding the zone, so to speak, and I know Google made a bunch of announcements. There'll be more from ServiceNow, from Zscaler, from whomever, Adobe, Salesforce. Your approach as a company, to me, seems to be more about a bottom-up feeling of, this is a pragmatic solution. We understand what you're facing as a customer. We want to make it simple for you. We don't want to be overwhelming. We want to make this more productive, and we want you to trust the agent. We don't want you to feel threatened by it. Is that kind of a theme or an undercurrent of what you're doing or trying to do?
Exactly. We've always come from the place that we want to connect dev and IT teams to all the business teams, right? And to help connect them so that the work gets done better. And we see as agents as coming and helping in those connections between these teams. So the root underlying framework that all of these agents rely on is what we call the teamwork graph. And the teamwork graph takes all the data from all of these tools and makes all of these agents much more powerful. And that teamwork graph has data from all the dev tools that you have, from all the knowledge tools that you have, and from all the IT tools that you have, as well as from third parties. And once it has all of this information, it just makes those agents work seamlessly inside your business workflow, rather than requiring you to learn a whole new workflow that you may not be used to. So it just kind of interjects itself in the right place at the right time, so that you're doing the work that you want to be doing, but it's a panel on the side that's suggesting things for you.
I think that's always been the big fear, is like having to relearn. I mean, that's one reason why people are so afraid of technology.
Exactly.
It's this idea like, oh my God, this thing called a VCR or a microwave or whatever, a smartphone. Now I've got to learn, I've got to start all over again. And in a sense, what you're doing is you're making an easy transition based on what they already understand, so they don't have to start from the ground up.
Exactly. So in my opinion, agents should come into the workflows that you're already familiar with and come and help you within there, right? Rather than requiring you to learn a whole new business workflow.
Okay. I was going to ask you, how do these new features that you mentioned differentiate Atlassian from folks like ServiceNow in the ITSM space? And I'm asking you that because ServiceNow, it seems to me, is making acquisition after acquisition after acquisition is a competitor. I'm wondering how you differentiate.
Yeah. Our main differentiation is the underlying data that we rely on. And what we do is that we take all your IT systems data, which other companies and competitors also do, but we connect it better to the dev information and all the product information that is there in Jira and Confluence. So typically when a issue comes up, that issue did not start just because something went down. There was usually some change that had happened, and that change was because you were trying to pursue some goal and some team was trying to do something. So when you want to resolve that issue and fix it, you want to have that context of how did this issue come up in the first place, right? There must have been some change that we were doing or some business goal that we are trying to pursue that caused a configuration change that then led to this issue. So being able to identify the cause of a problem requires you to be able to look to the left of your code, left of the operational system that you have. And that's the information that's already encapsulated inside Jira, Confluence, and so on. So we tie those things together to give you a better answer.
Okay. Maybe we can talk about Rovo agents. I'm wondering if you can elaborate on how those agents, their role in incident management and how they contribute to faster resolution times.
Yeah. This is an area we've been investing a lot in. So when an alert comes in or something goes wrong, usually it's not just one alert. There's usually a flood of alerts. And we've announced before that we allow you to alert group these things so that it actually separates the signal from the noise. And you can see what the gist of the problem is and not have to dig through every alert that's a duplicate of everything else. But now what we're announcing beyond that is an ops agent as well that goes beyond all of that to help you identify what the root cause of the issue is. So it looks across all your systems, all your prior incidents, as well as the information that you have in Jira and Confluence, and suggests that this is where we think the problem might be. And it also suggests resources that might help you resolve that issue, playbooks, for example, that you should execute. And further, it goes a step further by allowing you to take the action and say that, yes, I want to run this playbook. And then it actually automatically runs the playbook to fix the issue. And one of the other things it does, which people love, is that after the issue is resolved, it helps create a post-incident report for you so that you don't have to write it yourself about what just happened, right? So all of this comes with the operations agent that we're launching along with Jira Service Management.
Yeah, it's just like the takeaway for me always, again, consistently, is that this agent is actually helping me. It's not threatening my job.
Exactly.
It's kind of trying to ease my burden, and not in an intrusive way. Just like in kind of taking a little bit of the edge or the time off of these meddlesome tasks or these important tasks that need to be done, but you feel as if you have somebody who has your back.
Exactly.
And it's not another person, it's somebody who is going to probably be very accurate each time they do this.
It's a Robin to your Batman, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's the killer quote of so far of the show. Yeah. What are some of the expected impacts of these AI features on HR service management, and how do they improve employee experiences?
Yeah, so HR's departments are unique in the sense that they have a lot going on. Solving employee questions are obviously something that's top of mind, but it's just one part of their job. They have so many other things going on. So what they're really looking for is to get started quickly and to be able to resolve these employee questions very fast. The advantage they have is that typically they have very good knowledge bases. They're pretty good about writing down their policies, their leave policies, their compensation policies, and so on. So this is an ideal environment for AI agents to actually participate because they have the knowledge, and the requests that come in are typically well structured and frequently the same that have been seen before, right? So when we deploy AI agents into the HR, we find that HR folks love them because this is exactly the stuff that they don't want to be doing. They want to be doing higher end tasks of helping their employees, right? So we find like HRSM agents are getting great uptake in the HR world. They primarily help with things like that are very structured in the process, like employee onboarding, for example. There's a sequence of about 20 things that you typically have to do. And once you tell the AI agent, go create the employee records, update this form that will then trigger a laptop procurement or so on, it can do all of that for you in a sequence.
Okay. I was going to ask you, that's my final question, is what's next for Jira Service Management?
We want to continue investing in bringing dev, IT, and business teams together, and we're going to expand those connections. And we want to have more and more agents that work across these boundaries to help your information that's stored in one place to be used in other places so that the agents become much more powerful. So things like employee onboarding, things like solving an incident that might cut across many systems across your department. These are the kinds of problems we want to solve. You'll be hearing a lot more about these kinds of issues and these kinds of innovations that we are building in the next few quarters.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, thanks, Shamik. It was great meeting you. Thanks for your insight. Very interesting show. To me, it's like a very practical show about collaboration, teamwork, productivity, and then just eliminating clutter, eliminating unnecessary things that I find myself repeatedly doing, like trying to find data or trying to get answers to something that I got the answer to months before. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks. So that's it. We're going to have more interviews today from Atlassian Team 25 in Anaheim. For now, we'll see you in a few minutes.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel here from Techstrong Group, and you're watching another episode of the CD Pipeline. The CD Pipeline is a partnership between the CD Foundation of the Linux Foundation and us here at Techstrong, where about once a month we try to bring you some of the latest topics regarding or germane to the CDF audience, to the CD Foundation. For those of you not familiar with the CD Foundation, we usually have someone here from the CD Foundation. But for those not familiar, the CD Foundation, as I mentioned, is a daughter foundation of the Linux Foundation, but it's responsible actually for the management, upkeep, running of several of the largest tools in the CD universe, CI/CD universe, including Jenkins, Spinnaker, Tracy, one of yours?
Ortelius.
I think there's 8 or 9 different programs that fall under the auspices of the CDF, but it's more than just managing those. It's working groups around the security of them, of operating them, best practices. It is the community for CI/CD. And so this show, CD Pipeline, tries to capture that. This week's show is challenges and wins in integrating security tooling into CI/CD workflows. Let me introduce you to our panel for today, and then we can jump right into the topic. First of all, I think it's her first time on, and if I'm mistaken, right, Kate, it is your first time.
My first time.
Very cool. And I'm going to try not to mess up her name, but I forget things from one second to the next. Kate Scardilla.
Almost. Scarcella.
Scarcilla. If my eyes were better, I'd be able to read it up there because they didn't put it on my prompt here for me like they're supposed to, but they try. All right. Kate, beyond Scarcilla, what else can we learn about you here today?
So I am a cybersecurity architect. I got my Master's of Science in Information Security and did my thesis on securing the electrical grid in North America. And I graduated way back in 2006. And I tell people this because there was only 4 people in my graduating class. So nobody was really talking about cybersecurity, even though it was coming up in some products. You know, you had AV, you had networking security, and dare I mention the start of identity and access management, which was like, But anyway, so that's my background. And I did it for...
Very cool.
Yeah, so did it for a long time.
That was the electrical grid without Texas.
Very good.
So I'm not going to touch that one again, but I've been in security about 25 years myself, more now. And you're right. Back then it was network security or endpoint security, host security, as we called it. And it certainly has changed over the years, though it's become more important than ever, obviously. Are you still working in the security field today?
I am. I took a short sabbatical for about a year, and I'm just coming back out of that sabbatical. Connected with Tracy, who has full speed here this year. So yes.
Well, it's great to have you on here.
Thank you. I'm very
appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing more. Next up, we've got Ryan Ware, as in software. Brian, welcome to CD Pipeline. Tell us about yourself.
Hey, thanks, Alan. I'm really happy to be here. My first time as well. I appreciate Tracy dragging me to come on here. So I've been doing security in one way or another for 27 years or so. I'm a software developer by nature, but early in my career, I first started at Intel doing implementing security features into digital rights management stacks. Later, I did offensive security research into Intel's products. Later, I was more of a security architect and then worked in the realm of open source for quite some time on how do product teams incorporate open source in a secure way, as well as how do you securely make and contribute to open source externally. Intel has a large presence in the open source community. These days, I work for Carrier, where I am Deputy Chief Product Security Officer, focusing on security tooling, CI/CD, training, secure development practices. And I'm also in the Open Source Security Foundation, where I am the chair for the security tooling working group in that organization.
Very cool. You mentioned Intel's commitment to open source. I think it's very fashionable today to crap on Intel, right? They're not NVIDIA, right. And how the mighty have fallen. But I think people have never given Intel enough credit for their commitment to open source communities, open standards, and kudos to them for the work they do. I know they work very closely with the Linux Foundation, CNCF, OSSF, a lot of the foundations. So
absolutely,
shout out to them.
they do an amazing job with that, and still do, even with all the troubles they're having right now. They still have 1,000 open source projects out there under github.com/Intel. So
Absolutely. So shout out to them. All right. Our last panel member today is our friend Tracy Reagan. Tracy, of course, is CEO of Deploy Hub. Aurelius, one of the products under the CD Foundation, came out of Deploy Hub and their efforts. Tracy's also, I mentioned, she's a host on our Techstrong gang. And, you know, she has a hand in a lot of different Linux Foundation open source projects and boards, including OSSF, Open Source Security, OSSF, and the CD Foundation, among others. Tracy, great to have you on today.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I am a busy girl. I kind of have one foot in the security world and one foot in the DevOps world. I am on the board of the Technology Oversight Committee at the CD Foundation. I've served in that role now for several years. And I'm also on the board of the OpenSSF. So I'm keeping kind of my thumb on the heartbeat of both sides. And at the CDF, we recently started a special interest group called CI/CD Cybersecurity, which Kate is the chairperson of. And the reason I felt we needed to start it was because there isn't a strong enough handshake between what the security side of the business is doing and what the DevOps side of the business is doing. So it's time that we have that conversation. It's a really critical one. Most DevOps engineers, even just putting in the scanning of a SBOM is a major undertaking, and there's so much more to do. So it makes me a little nervous that we're so far behind the 8 ball. I want to remind everybody that it takes us about 100 days to respond to a vulnerability. It takes an attacker less than 10 days to exploit it. So we are at a major disadvantage here, and there has to be a discussion on how to improve that time. And so we're hoping that we can do that with this the new SIG at this CD Foundation. So all you CDFers out there, which I call you, please, CDFers, I want you to join the CI/CD Cybersecurity SIG and start helping us with really defining what that looks like in the pipeline. And I hope we can have a deeper conversation around that, considering we have 2 security experts on the call today.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, I've been in security 25 plus years, right? And truth be told, one of the reasons that I founded MediaOps Techstrong with, DevOps.com was I felt that DevOps and the whole CI/CD pipeline model was a way to get like a second bite at the apple for security. We could correct a lot of past wrongs by moving further left, shifting left into the development pipeline to fix security problems that by the time we saw them pop up in production, they were a lot harder to fix. It would be much easier to fix them further left. It sounded great, right? For 10 years at the RSA conference, I put on the DevSecOps event where we talked about this. DevOps.com, the whole rise of DevSecOps, as we call it, right? We made a lot of progress over those 10, 11, 12 years. But most recently, there's been a pushback where have we shifted left too far? And by that, have we put too much of the onus on security on the developer, who's not a security person, right? But nevertheless, we've made them the focal point for our security efforts in, pre-deployment security, where instead of, let's say, maybe building it holistically into the whole pipeline process, right, from left to right. And so, there's been pushback. Hey, instead of shift left, we should shift everywhere. We need to build security into testing. We need it built into the pipe, not onto the developer's shoulders. Now, Kate, you've got your master's degree in all of these things, and you're the head of the SIG. What can we do to it can't just be let's make the developer our security or make the dev our security person. He or she is not. What can we do? What are we doing? What should we do, you think, in terms of integrating security into this workflow?
Well, I think, and when you go out to the specific page that we have, one of the areas, security is very complex, as you know. Cybersecurity is very complex, and it has become the complexity in itself is also a vulnerability. So we need to make things simple. So yes, are we putting too much on the developer, and should we have it throughout the pipeline? Absolutely. But we also need to have bite size, these lunchable type of packages that we can say we're going to do, we're going to secure in the pre-deployment phase. And what does this look like? And I think the more simple that we have the tools, because as you know, to introduce a new tool is just a headache for our developers, and yet another tool and another tool and another tool. And so I think we need to have tools that are, and they're very expensive. So tools that are, open source, that can be used easily, and so that it doesn't take a master's degree to go out to try to figure out, well, how am I going to secure this? I think that's, something that we have talked about with the SIG. And just, it's so important to keep it simple. I mean, it sounds, ridiculous, but we have made it so hard. We have made cybersecurity so difficult to consume and so expensive. I mean, think about the tools that we have developed. I worked with IBM for over 20 years. And it's not just, it wasn't just one tool. It wasn't just, static, analysis, coding. It became, everything just grew and grew and grew. And we just would keep adding and adding. So I think we need to do more with less. So, the one tool can take on this pipeline from left and throughout. I don't know, Tracy and Ryan, what do you guys think?
Well, I preach simplicity all the time. Part of the problem with the CD pipeline, if I just put my DevOps hat on and not my security side, the problem with the CD pipeline is it's so brittle. Everything's based on a script. So we have to go update all those scripts. And that is not an easy task, folks. It is really not easy to manually update so many thousands of scripts, thousands and thousands of workflows. So it becomes a challenge because we don't want to touch those workflows. They break easily. So then maybe we have to have a security workflow that our workflow calls. So Kate, as you pointed out, we've made everything so complex. Everything, not security is complex, but so is our workflows. They're complex too. So we've dug ourselves in a bit of a hole and we're behind the 8 ball. So how do we get out of it? Now, many people know from my discussions that I have been a big fan of CD events. Let's rebuild and redefine how the pipeline works. But that, even though IBM has done a great job and that some of the team on that project has done a great job of defining what those events look like, and even Jenkins has a CD events plugin. I don't see what I like to call the giants, the Microsofts and the Intel, even though they've been doing a great job in some areas. I don't see them understanding why events are important, why it's important to disrupt how we do pipelines. So as long as we have this difficulty updating pipelines, I think we'll have difficulty implementing tools. So what we have to be able to do is define the low-hanging fruit. Let's at least get started with getting a software bill of material generated and make that a common mantra that we can really expose to the DevOps pipeline and the DevOps engineers to say, this is one way we can get started. At least let's start there. So simplicity, I think, will be critical.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tracy. I would like to go back to what Alan was saying for a minute, though, and just push back slightly on the idea that developers need to be security experts. I don't think developers need to be security experts, but developers do need to be capable of writing quality code. If we don't think that there's an expectation on them to write quality code, then I think there's something fundamentally broken in the system, because they're the ones that are writing the code. And security, in a lot of ways, is many security vulnerabilities are just engineering 101 quality issues, buffer overflows, null pointer dereferences, things like that. That said, I do like what you were just saying, Tracy, about events. I think one of the problems with how we have incorporated tooling into pipelines is, it's all about, okay, how do we get this tool in here and get results out of it? And that's not the focus it should be on. It should be on what's the activity that the developer is doing right now, and what's the information that we can get from our tools that would be helpful for the developer to have during this activity. A great example is pull requests on GitHub, for example. A lot of organizations use static application security testing tools, traditionally called static code analysis. Which, by the way, there's open source tools that have been making great strides in this area. GCC 14's static analyzer functionality is way improved over previous versions. That said, the right time to be able to show a developer about flaws in their code using a SaaS tool is during pull request time, and ensuring that when a developer needs the information about the quality and security of their code, it's important for them to have it at the right time. Traditionally, we've told developers, hey, yeah, you have to go over to this other place over here where the results for all the scans are stored. Developers hate doing that. They won't do it, and we're never going to win mind share doing it that way.
So let me weigh in here. I bet you if we did a survey of developers and said, how many of you want to develop low quality code? Not a lot of them are raising their heads. Every software developer I've ever met, just about, has a tremendous amount of pride in what they do and the code they develop. It used to be, before we got into the age of DevOps and pipelines and the software factory that we have today, software development was very much sort of like a guild, right? Not ancient, but, like old German guilds, where there was a lot of pride in craftsmanship and stuff like that. When I was a security guy, I used to think, boy, those people don't give a hoot about security. And if they did, we'd be better off. But then the more I got into DevOps, the more I learned that they do give a hoot about security and quality, right? Because security is synonymous with quality. And they do give a hoot. And then early on in DevSecOps, a lot of security companies said, you give a hoot about security, Mr. and Mrs. Developer? Here's a tool to use. Use our tool, use our tool, use our tool. And and that's where it went off the rails. They're not going to use a security tool. When you start telling a developer, hey, wait a second, we want to do a static analysis scan of your code, and that's not enough. Hold on. I want to do a dynamic scan analysis of your code. Wait, there's more. I see you've been using a lot of that open source stuff. We're going to do an SCA, software composition analysis scan of your code. And and I just bought this latest company's greatest new, ICAS or whatever the heck they're calling the next one. To the developer, they just hey, can you just tell me if there's bugs in my code so I could fix it? That's all they want to know.
100%.
Right. And I think we lose sight of that. And in a perfect world, that's where along this pipeline, these things get done and it makes its way back there. Right. And the code gets fixed. And look, here's the good news. We live in a wild time right now with AI and automation and everything. A lot of these things can be fixed on the fly like that. Right. I mean, stuff we dreamed about in 2006, right? The ability to do automated remediation. I was selling vulnerability management in 2006, No one wanted it took 90 to 120 days to remediate code. That was code in production, not code in development. So
we haven't gotten any better at that. It's still that.
No, we have, because I'm going to tell you the problem I had back then is we were able to identify vulnerabilities and we built workflow into our product that pointed to the patch. And we had the ability, because we also developed a NAC product, network access control. We had the ability to remediate on the fly. No one would let us.
Yeah.
No one would let us because they were afraid to patch without first testing to make sure that it didn't break something else.
It might break your stuff.
Right?
But we can't.
I'd rather be insecure than have broken stuff. I don't necessarily agree with that logic. But nevertheless, that was the prevailing logic. Have we changed? Ryan, you've been around.
We're trying.
Yeah. We're trying, but that means we haven't changed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I would say there are areas in the industry where it hasn't changed, and change is hard. And to be honest, I work in one of those industries right now. One of the things that blew me away when I came to work for Carrier is the support life for some of our products. I used to work on automotive stuff where they're talking about support life of 8 to 10 years. We have to support software stacks in our products for 25 to 30 years. And because of that, the interesting legacy implications of some of the software we have just are an interesting challenge for us in the new ecosystems. And a lot of people are resistant to change because of that.
Right. You're talking about critical infrastructure. I mean, right, Brian? I mean,
You know about it, Kate.
Windows XP, baby. Good luck. The one thing that I think would help us, and it's the antithesis of when we think about cybersecurity, but the bad actors are doing this, and that is, when we talk about open source, they actually, the bad actors actually do it right. They collaborate, right? The reason they're able to get their stuff done so quickly is they have such huge collaboration tools. And I actually think they're doing it right. I mean, it's a, crazy idea, but I think we need those who are trying to make things better, that we really need to be, have open source, from coming from all these, companies that were, doing proprietary stuff. I've been like this new open source, let's collaborate. I think it's going to be one of the most important things, because when we have this discussion about, the pipeline, and can it just be on the shoulders of the very beginning person, when we talk about cybersecurity, one of the things that we would talk about is everybody's, everybody has to know about cybersecurity. Everybody has to understand it, from the user with their, digital user interface with their mobile phone, which has become a human machine interface to so much, to to the worker, because we are one in the same, right? The home user is also the one who's going into the office, who's also working with it. We all need to think about cybersecurity differently, in order to help things to become, I mean, it sounds, somewhat esoteric, but we really we need to do it so it's not so scary, right? Because we sell based on people being scared. And we need to really back up from that and think, what are we going to do to make it better? I think. And, to Tracy's point about, low hanging fruit, boy, how much can how much can we do with just getting the low hanging fruit? I mean, I think, I think it could be like a 70% type of thing. And, maybe that's a crazy percentile, but low hanging fruit. I mean, it's a great idea.
There's definitive wins there.
Or there's a whole bunch. If you could just, just take those. We've got a few minutes left. Let me bring up another kind of push-pull that I think really affects us. And that is, and this has been going on for as long as I'm in security, which is, what's my tolerance for security slowing things down?
Well,
right?
That's a good question.
That's not a little question.
Because that same survey where I asked the developers, do you like making low quality or, crafting low quality code? The next question is, why don't you do security better? And it's always because the pressure is on and I get paid based upon how many lines of code I publish. And I don't have enough time to write and test. We don't have enough time to write and test the code thoroughly because we have deadlines to meet. And so when security becomes the people who say no and puts the brake on going faster, we very quickly get kind of shoved out to the side, pushed to the back, stay out of the way of this. You're standing in the way of progress. How do we, and again, this was one of the things about DevSecOps that I thought we would do better. How do we overcome that perception and move at the speed of business?
I like to say moving at the speed of DevOps.
Right? Okay, moving at the speed of DevOps.
So we have the cultures between the DevOps people and the culture between the security people could not be more different. If we think about a new vulnerability that's been found in production, the mindset of security is don't tell anybody, go through a event management process, notify only the people that should know, because if we tell everybody and let the development team who's being impacted know that we may have some kind of internal attack to it. So there is a hold the cards close to the chest mentality inside on the security side. It just is there. They lack the trust. They want the control of managing it. This slows everything down. Our culture there is just wrong. Now, remember, it may have started back in 2000, Alan, when you were trying to solve the problem. And what they were doing is if a bug was found, if a hacker found a vulnerability that impacted Microsoft or IBM or the government or Hewlett Packard or anybody else, they were purchased. So we had a 0-day market, and nobody told anybody about them. So that's where we begin our story in security. Now, on the other side, we have DevOps engineers who have been preaching agile development and releasing fast for the last 10 years. And we have gotten really good at it. And on top of that, we have Kubernetes, which means everything's decoupled. Everybody builds their own container. So that one production vulnerability could be living in hundreds of containers across our endpoints. So now we find ourselves having to fix some really big problems with a culture that doesn't want anybody to know about it, and another culture who says, you guys are way too slow. We need to continue pushing new innovation across the pipeline because that's what we're being told to do. And we're trying to build the best quality code we can, and we're trying to manage DevOps pipelines so that they're getting code out as quickly as possible because that's what the business demands. And security sitting there and saying, well, we don't want anybody to really know about this. Let us try to mitigate it and go through the process and only tell the teams that need to know that this problem happens. It doesn't work. Those two cultures are conflicting. So somehow we have to create that handshake, is kind of what I began this conversation. Security has to be more willing to open up the door and let more people know about it. Security has to be willing to have those fixes pushed across. And Alan, you were just way before your time. In our world, what we're trying to do, in Ortelius and Deployhub, Ortelius has the information right now to be able to push out a remediation. So we have discussions about discovery and how to remediate. We want to shift the focus to how does DevOps fix it? How can we use DevOps information to at least update a Helm chart or a Docker file, and at least create a pull request for a high security vulnerability that's impacting certain teams, and get it to them as quick as possible so they can make a decision if they want to move it forward. They can do the analysis and they can accept or reject that pull request. But to do that, we have to get the security teams to say, yeah, that would work. That would be okay. But at the moment, they may not be saying that because they're saying, no, we want to manage that response ourselves. And it slows everything down. And the world just keeps turning while security figures out what they need to do.
I think that's beautiful. You're right on. Yeah. I mean, we in the cybersecurity, Alan and Ryan, right? I mean, we need to change this mindset that we have. And I really do believe that we need to be more open about the vulnerabilities that we have, or we're not making it the way we were doing it. We know that. So it's about time that we switch things up and say, okay, let's try something different.
Yeah, I agree with what both Tracy and Kate were saying. I'd also just add to taking a little bit of a perspective change. I think security folks a lot of times lose sight of what developers really need to do their jobs right and do their jobs the way security folks think they should do their jobs. And a lot of the things that security professionals ask teams to do without thinking about it dramatically slow development down. And like I was talking about static code analysis results and pull requests earlier. Well, that works great if you're doing, for example, writing code in Python or JavaScript. You can get results pretty quick out of there. But that doesn't work very well if you're talking about a code base like the Linux kernel that has 40 million lines of C code in it. To do static code analysis on something like that takes, 1.3 to 1.5 times the build time, and building the Linux kernel is not a small event anyway. So you can't ask dev teams to wait for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours for results on tools into a pull request before they can go accept it. You have to figure out what's the right balance to be able to bring the bar up from where teams are doing it right now to doing it in a way that they feel is acceptable use of their bandwidth and their time.
Agreed. Hey guys, we're about out of time here, unfortunately. We didn't mention the CDF. You mentioned the SIG that you guys started. It's cdfoundation.org, isn't it, Tracy, the website for the CDF?
cd.foundation.
Excuse me, cd.foundation.
Foundation, yes. And the SIG is new. It just started in January. And our first exercise is we're going through the secure software development framework. We're looking at every single task that relates to the pipeline, and we're associating open source tools that can be used to accomplish the task.
I love it. Can you get to the SIG off of cd.foundation page?
You should be able to go to the community page and find it.
All righty. Kate, congratulations on leading the SIG there and getting your hand into this open source security world. It's going to... We can all use the help. So thank you for your efforts there. Ryan, same to you, right? It sounds like you've been involved in this for a while now, whether it's through Carrier or Intel, what have you. And thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I just have one more thing before we sign off. I want to shout out to Sasha Wharton, who is one of our top Ortelius contributors, and he was recently nominated to the CDF governing board as an open source representative. So we're super proud of him.
Congratulations to Sasha as well. All righty. That's it for CD Pipelines. We'll be back next month with more. But until then, you can get all of your CD information at cd.foundation. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.